But those are the kind of things that falls into that whole developer tricks thing, which you don't want to do, because then it's hard to explain to other people what you did and how people pick up on what's going on there. So let's look for a module. Okay. So it looks like module.css is first. Yeah. So you're able to override. Yeah, that's what I thought. So you're able to override anything in module.css from default.css down. So module.css is the first thing applied. And that makes sense too. So if a module developer, for those of you who don't know what module.css is, if a module developer gives you a module, they can include a module.css. Say we can include skin.css. And what that does is it provides classes to style that module. Okay. I want to make sure that we have enough time to cover CSS-based layouts. So I'm going to move on right now. I'll make sure that we cover that. So what I want to show you are two different ways of doing CSS-based skins. Okay. So the first one is one that I created, and if you come up and give your email again, I'll email it to you after the session. It's basically just a base setup of a CSS-based layout for .NET Nuke. Okay. So for those of you that have used .NET Nuke before, and those of you who have a little more experience in using .NET Nuke, you have probably run across the fact that you can make it so that you have multiple different options in the .NET Nuke skin. So you guys see that? Yes. Okay. So one of the cool things about .NET Nuke and with .NET Nuke skin is that if you want to create a single skin that has many different layout options, you can put something on there called, you can put an attribute that says visible equals false. And what that does is that if you don't have a module in that region or in that pane, then it'll automatically get collapsed. Okay? But as soon as you add a module into it, then that pane or that region, that content region, won't collapse. So what that gives you the ability to do, that makes it so that you can say, okay, I want a full width version. I want a version where it has left 1/3 and right full. I want to have a 3-column layout, and I want to have a left full. I want to have one where I have a right rear. My names are kind of confusing there, sorry. So that's really useful if you need to have multiple layout options that you're going to deliver to a client or you're going to use for your own purposes. So you don't have to create 4 different versions of that skin, right? So if I show you real quickly on the OF updates, I can use the same one here. So you can see on this OF updates, I've got that same layout here, and so I can have things in the content pane in a version where it's got left rail, a version where it's got right rail, and a 3-column. But if we go to view, then all the ones that don't have content in them collapse. Okay? So this is a trick that's been used in .NET Nuke scenes for a while. Okay? And it's a good trick unless you're using table-based layouts. Okay? Here's why. When you're using a table-based layout, let me show you the example that's from. When you're using a table-based layout, like they do, actually, I can demonstrate this in the core .NET Nuke skin. You said this is streaming, right, Will?
Yes, it is.
You know who's watching it?
No, not right now.
Okay, so in the core .NET Nuke skin, for the actual content area, they use tables. And because they use tables, and they use that visible equals false problem, or they use that visible equals false to hide part of their skin, then it is creating invalid HTML right here. So what they do is they have a table, and the table cell has a visible equals false on it. And by putting that visible equals false on the table cell, then it hides the cell. The problem is that that leaves these table rows behind with no table cells in there. And so that causes 2 things. One, you've got invalid HTML, okay? And you're going to run into display bugs because of this. Okay, so some of you are nodding your head because you've been down this road before. Why do I have this extra space here in this browser, not this browser? It's because you've got to invalidate HTML because it's in the .NET core. So what I want to show you is that there is a better way. And what you can do is by using divs to do layout, and I'm going to come down. This is my layout. Yes. Okay. So can everybody see this okay? So basically what I've done is I've got these, you can call them the equivalent of rows, but each one of these is a layout. So this is a one-call layout. And then in here, I've got visible equals false. So when there's nothing in that, when there's nothing inside of this div, it's going to hide this div, and the only thing that's going to be left behind is a blank div. So then you don't have extra space, because with XHTML, it's going to collapse that when there's no content in the div. Okay? And also, you're not going to leave behind fragmented HTML by having a table row with no table cells. Okay? Down here, same thing. For my two-column, my divs, they're just float left. So I got float left, and then this one's active both on. So what that does is you've got this one floating left, and it's got a width of 200 or whatever, and then the next one's floating left, and it's got a width that takes up the rest of the space. So then basically you've got two divs that flow next to each other, and the content can grow, and everything's good. Everything's cool. Same thing here. One thing I want to point out, you might see this no pane border here. On the two-col L row, I just removed it. The reason I wanted to remove it is to point out a display problem in .NET. So I'm going to go to forest.local. And let's log in. I must be doing okay. We only got one guy asleep. It's right after lunch, so that's awesome. Okay, so I'm going to go to layout, and you'll see that. So you'll see the way this is laid out right now. .NET to mark where you have your content areas puts a 1-pixel border around that area. Problem with that is when you've got two cells floated next to each other, and one's 250, or one's 250, and one's the remaining space, that makes it so that the containing area where it lives in, you've got 1, 2, 3, 4 extra pixels of space there of content, and so then that makes it back to the next line. You've got two divs there, right? So I covered this again in the book as a. I'm sneaking them in, right? Okay, so I cover this as I've got a little trick, and actually I'll email this to you if you tell me your email address at the end, where I just use some CSS selectors to hide this border and to mark off the header of it so that you've got a nice little, you still got the nice separation, but when you're in layout mode, you can still see the way your skin's supposed to lay out, right? Does that make sense? You guys understand the problem and solution there? Okay, cool. So that's what I did with that.
What's the magic wording which makes a visible false but a visible true if you have content?
It's built into DNN. They check to see if it's set to visible equals false once you add content in there. Because by having it, okay, so each of these are server controls. As soon as you make it run an equal server, get an ID, then it's actually an HTML server control, so there's just an HTML element on your page. And so then when you say visible equals false, that's part of the core ASP.NET, whatever everything in HTML object, but whatever everything inherits from has visible equals false on it. So when you say visible equals false, then it behaves like any other .NET control, and then it hides itself. Okay. So if you don't have any content, then core.NET doesn't bother with it and lets it behave as it should. But when you actually have content in it, then when you say visible equals false, .NET, when it's doing its magic of laying everything out with the correct panes, it checks to see if it was visible equals false, and it'll change that attribute. Okay? So that's how the magic of that works. Any question?